Well, hello everybody and happy Sunday. Hello again, by the way. This is part two. Sorry about that. Facebook is not being very friendly to me this time around. Let me know if you can hear me now. But I wanted to talk to you today, like I do most Sundays, about stuff that's on my mind, about stuff that I'm hearing, about stuff that I'm seeing. People email into us all the time. And I think there's something in the air now because I am hearing so much more. Let's see, I got comments. Let me make sure that I actually, man, yeah, I cannot see your comments today. Facebook is being a pain. So I hope you can hear me. Anyway. I'm going to go forward and hopefully this is all working. So, what do I want to talk about today? I want to talk about this idea of convincing. And I get this question so much. That's like, hey, Scott, how do I convince my husband, best friend, girlfriend, wife, whatever, that this thing that I'm doing, right, that they need to change their relationship with alcohol as well? All right, great. I do see your comments now. I had to open up another window. I got you. Hello. We're good. I could complain about technology, but honestly, this is the way that I get to be able to talk to you guys. So, at any rate, I want to talk about convincing, and I want to answer that question, which is, how can I convince people to do something? Hello, Anne Marie and Baton and Stacy. All right, good. But first, before I do that, I want to give you an invitation. So we have been asked so many times, and people keep saying, like, how can I change the way I think so that changing my relationship with alcohol is easier? And this is what we do, right? This is what we specialize in. This is absolutely what it is to work with this naked mind. But we've had a lot of people say, like, hey, can we do it faster? Right? Is there a way that we can shorten the process? Can you give me all the info I need to know? And I'm very happy to announce that this Tuesday, March 8th, Annie and I are going to do just that. We are doing a day-long virtual event where we're going to be on Zoom all day, and we are going to transform the way you think and feel about alcohol so that you can finally take back control of your relationship and create whatever change that you want. We are going to spend all day talking about this change. We're going to spend all day giving you tools and ways that you can shift your own thinking and find a different relationship with alcohol. So that is happening this Tuesday, March 8th. Link is in the description. I would love to see you there. I'm really excited about this. This is going to be like totally brand new stuff. But it is going to be something that is going to shift thinking. It's going to be huge. So if you can join us, I would love to see you there. Again, the link is in the description. Stacy says, I would love to do the event this week, but I need to arrange time off. I totally get it. That's totally fine. Hopefully we'll be doing something like this in the future. But I don't know. I don't know what the plans are on that. We don't have any plans right now. Oh, Anne-Marie says, how can I connect with the time difference in France? So this starts at 11 a.m. East Coast time, and I believe you are 6 hours ahead of us, so that will be 5 p.m. your time. If this is a hit, if this is something that people like, then this might be something that we do more, but it's something we wanted to try because we know that we can shift your thinking in a relatively short amount of time, and so we want to do that. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to convincing. So, like I said, this question comes in various forms to me, right? It'll be like, hey, how do I convince my, fill in the blank, husband, wife, best friend to understand that it's not just me that has a problem with alcohol, right? Or how do I convince my friend to finally make the shift because I feel so much better? And this question makes a lot of sense. Honestly, with this journey with alcohol, once we see it for what it is, right? Once we understand it for what we're doing, for how it can impact our life, for how much it can make us feel better, obviously we want to share it, right? I mean, it's so funny, like when you think about the pain. And by the way, this is whether you are totally have shifted your relationship or if you've just found this new way with this naked mind to make a change in your life. we want to share the information. And this goes for a lot of different things, right? This isn't just about alcohol, but it could be around food or smoking or so many other things. So we have this feeling like, oh, I've been able to make this huge shift in my life. This has made a big difference for me. I want to tell someone about it. Generally, what we mean is not that I just want to tell someone about it, but I want that other person to have the same change that I have had, right? And so this is coming from a really good place in that you want to share the love. You want to share the experience. You want to share your time together so that you can, give them the same advantage that you've had. The problem is convincing doesn't work. Convincing doesn't work. Like, you can't force someone to understand or see anything. You can't force them to do anything, right? And here's the reality, right? And you probably remember this with your journey with alcohol as well, is that, like, no matter where you are on it, we spend a long time sort of deciding, like, should we or shouldn't we, or should I use this method or should I use that method? Do I really want to change or do I not want to change, right? We spend so long, we're like in our own thinking. And it can be very difficult when someone we love, particularly if that's a partner, and I have a story for you about that in a little bit, particularly if that's a partner, to come in and be like, hey, try this. Hey, have you heard of this? Hey, can you do this? Right? The reality of it is this, right? This change for you wasn't something you wanted to change until it was. Right? So all of us are kind of on our own journey, and it's not until we make up our minds and we say, hey, now I want to do that, that we might be open to this. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily matter how difficult the experience is. I mean, this is the other side of it. I can tell you, for me, I spent so long very unhappy, right? Really not feeling well, really, waking up with hangovers and knowing that this was going in a bad direction. All of this was actually happening, and there wasn't anyone who could convince me, and maybe you've had the same experience, right? Chances are, like, I know my wife many times was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be drinking so much. And I would get defensive and I didn't want to hear it. And I wasn't ready. So then, if that's the case, right, how do we get people to change their minds? Well, I can tell you this, and this is actually one of the really cool secrets of this whole thing. And by the way, again, this goes for so many different types of change. This isn't just about changing your relationship with alcohol. I can tell you that cajoling, convincing, nagging, repeating, like, none of those things actually help. They don't. And as a matter of fact, those things are probably hurting you if you find yourself on the side of, like, coming to this with convincing energy. And you're like, hey, read this book, or hey, take this course. Like, it'll change your life, right? It can be very frustrating for you. I know that's been the case for me in the past when people that I have loved and that I've known have, wanted to make this change. And I try really hard to force this on them and they don't want it. The reality is this, right? Only you the reality is this: you can only live your life. You can only live your life, not someone else's, right? You can't live someone else's. You can't actually shift and change someone else's idea of themselves. You can't actually convince someone else. They have to want it at some point too. And when you spend a lot of time focusing effort and intention on someone else, that tends to almost push them away, right? Plus, on top of that, it's very frustrating for you. And you can lose track of your own journey. I have a story about this I definitely want to talk about. So my wife has never had a struggle with drinking. But as those of you who work with us know, This Naked Mind is a lot more than drinking. And we use the tools that we learn in this program to improve our life in general. So, I've been on this journey now for years, right? And she had been experiencing anxiety with work and stress with work. We have a young baby as well, and she was really starting to feel worn down toward the end of last year. And so I had all of these things when I'm like, hey, try this or read this book or do that, right? And I was seeing her hurting. I was seeing her being upset. I was seeing her worn down, and I wanted to help with that, but I couldn't. Right? Because no matter how many times I would say, hey, read this. Hey, look at this. Hey, try this. Right? No matter how many times I did that, it didn't take. She would just be like, leave me alone. So I left her alone. I mean, I didn't totally leave her alone, but I backed off, right? And I stopped trying to offer help. I started instead just trying to offer support. Like, man, I'm so sorry. Gee, that's got to be hard. That's got to be difficult. And so I would do that instead. Now, she went on a few more months feeling very stressed, feeling like really like burning the candle at both ends, feeling like, gosh, I can't like get enough time for myself, all of this stuff. Until she finally decided, you know what, I'm going to talk to someone. And she connected with a therapist and started doing work. And then all of a sudden, she came to me one day and she's like, do you know any books by this lady, Brene Brown? And I'm like, oh my God, like I am a huge Brene Brown fan. And I, as a matter of fact, had recommended them in the past. But see, it wasn't my pushing. It wasn't my convincing. It wasn't my saying, hey, I need you to do this for you. I need you to feel better. I don't like seeing you hurt, right? That was never the thing that actually got her over the edge. The thing that got her to make the commitment to herself was living her own life, was experiencing her own journey. And so the answer to how do I convince someone to do something? How do I convince my husband he needs to change? How do I convince my wife that maybe I'm not the only one with a drinking problem? It's really simple. The absolute best thing you can do is make that change inside yourself. Oh, and David absolutely beat me to the punch here. Exactly, David, man. You know it. You get it. Right? That is the way. That is the way that things shift. That is the way that you can actually influence their thinking. It's by doing the work yourself, and then you show up differently. You show up differently, and they go, whoa, what's going on with him? What's going on with her? Right? You actually make that change. And I've seen this, by the way, I've seen this over and over and over with people who make change around alcohol in some of our alcohol programs, where one member of a couple makes this shift, and then all of a sudden, like months down the road, it doesn't happen right away, but like all of a sudden they start getting these questions like, hey, what was it really like for you to quit drinking? Like, what was it really like for you to do this differently? How do you handle stress? Right? That's how these questions start happening. And so when they come to you, then you can have that conversation. And what you're going to find is that when you have that conversation, it's so much easier. So now my wife and I get to nerd out on all of this stuff that I've been so into for years. But instead of me trying to force my way in, instead of me trying to say like, oh, you should read this book or listen to this podcast or do this course, she's saying, whoa, I'm starting to realize that I have this much power over my thinking, or I'm starting to realize that this thing I was doing wasn't helping me, and so I'm changing it. Or man, I just discovered this huge belief that made a big deal. This is the power of leading by example. Because when you are the absolute best version that you can be, that is attractive. Other people want to do that. And by the way, I know I've said this before, this has so much to do with so much more than alcohol. You can apply the same thing to smoking, or to just changing your thinking and being more positive in general, or to food. Every single time we spend effort trying to convince someone else to do the thing, we're taking away from our focus on our own journey. And the irony here is your own journey is how people actually see the difference. I remember I had someone in one of our programs one time, and she said to me, well, she asked me this very question, like, "Hey, Scott, I'm watching these intensive videos and they're really great, but like, how do I actually get my husband to watch? Because I'll tell you what, like, you thought I drank a lot, right, and on and on and on." And I gave her the same answer, and she did not believe me. She did not believe me at all. So she comes back the next week with another question, and she goes, "All right, so I'm being driven a little bit crazy by his drinking. So like, how can I protect myself?" Now, that was a question we could answer, right? Because that was something she had control over. And so she created some boundaries for herself, right? She said, "Hey, if you're gonna be drinking in the living room, I don't remember all the details, but generally, if you're gonna be drinking in the living room after like 7 p.m., I'm gonna go watch TV over here, or I'm gonna go do my work over here." And that was what she needed to protect herself. But she then used that energy that she was using to be angry at him on her own journey. And that made a massive difference. Fast forward, by the way, to the end of the course. This is back when we used to offer a 3-month course. On our very last call, she raises her hand and she said, "Scott, I have something to tell you." And I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, my husband is halfway through the intensive videos now." And I was like, "What happened? Like, how did that possibly happen?" Right? And she said exactly what I just told you. She said, "I drew that boundary. I started focusing on me. He started to see that positive shift. And all of a sudden, he wanted that. He wanted that. He saw that it was easier for me to get up in the morning. He saw that like I could go out, all of these worries we have about alcohol, right? I could go out without needing a drink. He saw me feeling better and laughing and acting like me again. And he said, "I want a piece of that. How do I get that?" And she goes, "Oh, well, you might know. I'm in this course. Here are the videos." It's so funny, isn't it? Because like we spend so much time really wanting to force and change. And I get it. I totally understand. Like you feel better. Life feels better. Everything feels better. But the reality is we don't need to convince. We don't need to push. And as a matter of fact, when we do push, we actually push away. Because no matter how well-intentioned your message is, when you're saying, "Hey, like this book changed my life. I really wish you would read that." No matter how much you try to tap dance around the specifics or any anecdotes, no matter how much of that you do, what they hear is, "There's something wrong with me." Or more specifically, "She thinks there's something wrong with me." And it's funny because this ends up doing the exact opposite of what we intended to do. Right? And I'll go back to the story with my wife. I have for years, this poor long-suffering woman, she is a saint. But like for years, I would be like, "Oh my God, I just read this book and it's amazing." Or, "Oh my God, I just did this and it's amazing." Like, you have to do it. I feel so much better, right? I was so animated and into it. And what she hears is, "Oh, he thinks there's something wrong with me." And I never did. I never did. That was never my intention. I was never trying to say, "You know what? It sucks when you're mopey." That wasn't it. All I was saying was that this has made my life so much better. But this is the point that I was getting at, that you can only live your own life. And so when someone is accosted, that might be a strong word, but when someone approaches us saying, "Hey, if you did this, you'd feel better. Try this, do this," right? It's so easy for us to blame ourselves, and we end up pushing those people away. So I want to invite you to please, type in some questions I'll get to at the end. But what I want to say then is, people say, "Okay, great, Scott, I get it," right? I can't force someone else. I can't make someone else do this. How then do I help them? What then do I do? I get that I can't like force them to read a book, or I can't make them do something specific, right? But what happens here Instead, when you focus on yourself, is you radiate that change. And when you focus on yourself, you have the ability to be more supportive. You have the ability to put your arm around someone, to just be there. And that's the thing, right? If you think back to your own journey, like that's the thing that actually makes the difference, right? Is that we feel like someone has us, whatever that means. You know, think of the difference if you are struggling with this right now, maybe, or as time goes on, or in your past, if you've dealt with this. Think of like a really bad day with alcohol and you're feeling really terrible and someone just goes, I know, it's hard. Man, you feel heard, right? You feel like, okay, someone gets it. Now compare that to, yeah, I know you had a really bad day, but you know what you should do? You should read this book. So to answer that question, how do I convince someone? The answer is you can't focus on you, be the change, and that radiates. To answer the next question, well, then how do I support someone? Well, you're just there. You can be a shoulder to cry on. You can be someone to talk to. You can be someone who provides love instead of trying to force. And it's so incredible what happens as we do this, right? Like as we do this, people become more and more curious and then they come to you. So I have some good questions coming in. I knew this one would get some questions rolling, and I'll get to that in a minute. But just as a paraphrase, or as a sort of, the whole idea is this. Scott, how do I convince someone they need to quit drinking? My answer is you can't focus on yourself, be that change, and people will come to you. The next question is, well, how do I support someone who isn't ready? It's just being there. It's just listening. It's just saying, I know. And it's being willing to talk, but let them lead. Because when they lead, you can be there as a support. And by the way, when they need that support, they will look at you and they will say, oh my gosh, like he really has made a shift. They will see you and say, wait, this isn't impossible. That's so much more powerful than saying over and over, you need to read this stuff. So I hope that makes sense. And I know that that's kind of like a spin. And what we normally say is like, all right, well, you got to like really force them and they really need to understand. The fact of the matter is they're not going to understand until they're ready to understand. They're not going to understand until they want to understand. My wife wasn't ready to do the work that she's done in the last few months until she was ready to do the work that she's done in the last few months. It didn't matter how many times I said something. It didn't matter how many times, you know, how many books I read or conferences I went to or things I suggested and fire hosed at her. It didn't matter until she was ready. That was pushing her away. And so that's the idea. You cannot convince, but you can be an example. You can influence. So I do have a couple of questions. Anne-Marie says, please let me know how many hours it will last. It's going to be a full day. So I think we're going to be going to about 6 p.m. Eastern time. We might go a little bit later. So it sounds to me like, Anne-Marie, you can be there for most of it for sure. Dixie says, can't you educate like you are educating us now? I guess if they ask for help, but not unsolicited advice. Dixie, you hit the nail on the head. I love your name, by the way. You hit the nail on the head, right? This idea of, and I'm not using this in any religious sense. I just want to use the word because I think we all know what it means. But this idea of like alcohol-free evangelism, right? Of like, oh my God, like, because I could do this too. And I did do this for a long time. And I have a lot of stories about people that were like, dude, calm down. I get that a lot, in case you can't tell. But like, you know, I felt so much better. I felt so, there were possibilities and things were completely different for me once I quit drinking. But people who didn't want to hear it didn't want to hear it, right? And so when I see someone who I think is drinking too much, instead of saying, you know, you should really not drink so much, you know, and again, just put yourself in their shoes, right? No one actually wants to hear that. But if you could instead be that person that's like, hey, I'm here if you need to talk, right? I'm here to help you. then they will come to you. And then that becomes solicited advice, right? That becomes them coming to you and saying, Dixie, like, I've seen such a shift with you. Like, how did you do it? There's an opening, right? There's a time. There's something that we can then say, okay, let me tell you about this, right? Whatever that was for you. So I hope that makes sense. The idea here is convincing and forcing versus having a conversation when the time is right. You've heard that old saying, I'm sure, right? Nobody takes advice they don't ask for. So the trick is that you focus on yourself, you do that self-care, you change your life, and they go, I want some of that. Hey, how'd you do it? That's a totally different conversation. So I hope that helps, Dixie. Stacy says, I can tell my friend is on the verge of becoming curious, but hasn't asked and knows about my new knowledge. Shall I just edit it out? Stacy, it's so interesting. So one of the things that you can do with this is, yes, on the whole, I'll tell you what I do, and you do you. But on the whole, this is how I handle that sort of thing. If someone is curious or kind of on the edge, it's different for me. I'm very public with it, so like everyone knows and all of this stuff. But in general, I don't answer a question that wasn't asked. That's it. I don't answer a question that wasn't asked. Now, you might find yourself in a position where you are discussing, being sober curious, or you are discussing, maybe I want to make this shift, right? But that, in that instance, that's what makes a huge difference, is that you can say, okay, you know what? I see that, here was my experience. You can test the waters that way. The idea, though, isn't that you like hoard this information and hide it. It's just that you let it out when the time is right. So if your friend is becoming curious but hasn't asked, that might mean that your friend's not ready yet. And that's okay. That's okay. One thing that's very helpful, and I've done this with people as well, is, someone kind of brings it up, or someone like makes like a side comment. Like, you can just tell, you talk to someone, you can just tell, like, maybe they're just about ready to make a shift. I always just say, hey, I'm happy to talk to you anytime you want about this. I leave it at that. Keep the conversation going, because when you do that, then they know that you're there without you coming on too strong. And that's the main thing, is just this idea of convincing energy. Anytime we bring convincing energy to a conversation like this, tends not to go well. And like I said, put yourself in their shoes, right? When you are, when you were working through this on your own, you wouldn't really want someone to come in and be like, hey, I've got all the answers. You want them? Right? If you're not sure if you want to quit, or you don't really know, people have to be ready. And so when they're ready, you can be an amazing resource. So I hope that makes sense, Dizzy. I know that's not like a direct, like, super clear thing, but in general, I try not to answer questions that no one's asked me. And this took a lot of practice too, Stacy. So I hope that makes sense. Hey, Dan and Carrie, how are you? I'm glad you're here. Let's see. Sue Steele says, yep, so true. Self-care is vital. On day 65, hell yes, Sue. That's really awesome. Feeling awesome. Started out doing dry January. I can't tell you how many friends have started doing AF. I was so ready. Yes. This is what happens. This is how the change works. People see it and they want what you have. And it's so great to finally have that conversation in a, oh, I'm really excited sort of way, instead of a convincing sort of way. So thank you for that, Sue. And let's see, one more comment. Let's see. Jen says, it's so cool to see people not drinking just because they want to be healthier, not necessarily because they have a problem. Alcohol in any amount isn't good. I love the new trend. It makes me proud to be around people drinking and not partaking. Not that I'm better than them. I love this, but like, I have a wonderful secret, and I've figured out something others don't know yet. Yes, Jen, that's so good. And I can't tell you, in my personal life, how many people, friends, people I've known for a long time, people that I've recently met, that kind of find out and then reach out to me. That's so strong. but I'm only able to do that because I focus on me. You know, I've definitely been around a lot of drunk people in the last 6 years that I've been alcohol free. But I don't, I don't throw the book at them, meaning This Naked Mind, the book. I don't do that. Instead, I'm there and they know I'm there. So, if you feel this urge, this pull to convince someone to make this change, I want to suggest to you that you take that energy and put it into your own journey. Because the more you can do for yourself, the more you can actually be there to support them, not in a convincing way, but in a way that shows love, in a way that shows information, in a way that shows love, and a way that shows support. So I hope this makes sense to all of you. I am always excited to do these lives. I'm going to be a little bit more regular coming up. I've had some travel recently and apparently some technical problems. So thank you guys for your patience with that. And don't forget, if you can join us Tuesday, March 8th, Annie and I are doing a day-long program where we are going to give you the tools to completely shift your thinking about alcohol. This is going to be amazing. We have never done anything like this in the past. This is all going to be brand new. I'm really, really excited about it. So it's Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. Head over to the link in the description to find out more. All right, that is it for me. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Stacy says 43 days. Yes, and 128 with 2 data points. That's amazing. I almost jumped off before I got a chance to celebrate that, Stacy. Congratulations on that. That is so awesome. All right, everybody, that is it for me. I will be back next week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you soon. Take care.